Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined, they're real. Salt Lake City, Utah. October 22nd, 2018, University of Utah campus. The subject is Lauren McCluskey, a 21-year-old track athlete who had already done the right thing. She had reported harassment earlier in the month and adjusted her routines accordingly. On this night, the facts move fast and the records are clear, according to police reports and contemporaneous media. At approximately 8:20 p.m., while Lauren is on the phone with her mother, the call cuts out mid-sentence. Within minutes, the family places a 911 call. That timestamp becomes the anchor for the entire response. The campus dispatch tones out units and notes the call type as a welfare check with possible danger. Officers begin a split-task protocol: one unit to locate the caller's last known position, one unit to secure cameras and request building access logs, one to start a vehicle lot sweep. 8:32 p.m. First officers arrive at the residence hall parking lot. They locate dropped belongings consistent with an interrupted movement, a phone at or near the initial contact point, a small item nearby. Dorm doors and locks are intact. There is no forced entry to the building. The immediate read is that the confrontation occurred outside, not inside a dorm. That single conclusion keeps the scene architecture stable for the rest of the case. Supervisors set a perimeter and assign a grid search across adjoining lanes of the lot. A second team begins CCTV pulls from residence hall cameras and any adjacent systems that capture vehicle lanes. Officers request rideshare activity summaries and carrier pings for the window surrounding the cutoff call. Negative evidence locks the clock. No further outgoing activity from Lauren's device after 8:20 p.m. That silence is not speculation. It's a measurable gap that narrows the window for what happened next. Neighbors and students are canvassed quickly. The instruction is simple: note vehicle movements and odd repositioning within the last 30 minutes. An officer flags a vehicle that appears slightly off axis, as if moved under stress or in haste. Timestamps from camera pulls begin to bracket the crucial interval between 8:20 and 8:32. The priority is to reconcile what the cameras show with where the dropped items lie. One lane of inquiry asks a routine question with big impact. If the contact began at point A, why is a vehicle at point B now? That question, kept factual, drives where bright lights and K9s go next. The command post updates the family with only what is verified. The search escalates. 9:55 p.m. Officers locate Lauren in the back seat of a parked vehicle within the same lot. Medical personnel are staged, but the scene indicates fatal injuries consistent with a firearm. The perimeter tightens to preserve trace evidence. Notifications are made. The working status moves from welfare check to homicide. A secure-in-place alert goes out within minutes to the campus community to minimize contamination and to keep potential witnesses in place. The paperwork begins even before the tape is fully strung. Evidence logs, collection signatures, camera download receipts, search pattern sketches. That administrative spine is not glamorous, but it's how the case holds together later. Nothing about the scene suggests a dorm breach. Everything about it points to a parking lot confrontation with a vehicle repositioned after the initial contact. Those are the facts that will not change in later chapters. With the perimeter stable and the clock preserved, custody of Lauren's remains transfers to the medical examiner under seal. The investigation now shifts to what the body can tell, quietly, precisely, and without retelling the discovery. The transfer happens quietly. Once the perimeter is stable and documentation begins on the lot, Lauren McCluskey's remains are released to transport and delivered under seal to the Utah office of the medical examiner in Salt Lake County. From this point forward, every action is logged: time of release from the scene, the name and badge number of the officer handing over custody, the vehicle ID, the receiving investigator at the ME's office, and the condition of evidence seals on arrival. The morgue is not a backdrop. It is a controlled workspace where the case either holds together or starts to fray. According to police reports and contemporaneous media, the medical examiner would later certify homicide by firearm. That certification is the endpoint of a process designed to withstand courtroom scrutiny. Intake begins at the Sally port. Technicians confirm the seal numbers match the field log. Property is inventoried without interpretation. Clothing is collected, jewelry if present, any personal effects that remained with the decedent when transport departed. Each item is assigned a property tag, then packaged for trace retention. In cases like this, gunfire in an outdoor setting, clothing is preserved intact to protect microscopic material that can still signal distance, trajectory, or post-impact deformation. Labels record who opened which bag and why. If a seal must be broken, a new seal is applied and logged. This audit trail is not flexible. It is the spine of admissibility. Radiography comes next. Full-body X-rays establish the presence, number, and location of projectiles or fragments. The purpose is twofold: guide the external and internal examinations, and later inform ballistics comparison by class and features if recovery is possible. Trajectory analysis in the morgue does not replace reconstruction at the scene. It complements it. Angles, wound tracks, and projectile pathways documented here can explain why trace patterns appear where they do in the vehicle's back seat and on clothing. The morgue's measurements give detectives something durable to test against camera timestamps and vehicle repositioning logs. The external exam documents identifying features, injury patterns, and any medical interventions attempted by first responders. Photographs are taken from standard orientations with scale markers. Wounds are described precisely. Location relative to fixed anatomical landmarks, entry versus exit where determinable, and associated features such as abrasion rings or tearing consistent with bullet passage. The report avoids speculation. If soot, stippling, or powder tattooing is absent or not discernible due to clothing or distance, that is recorded as a finding, not a conclusion. The key is reproducibility. Another qualified examiner should be able to read the notes and replicate the description without seeing the body. The internal exam maps, wound tracks, and documents organ damage. In firearm homicides, examiners often recover projectiles or fragments when feasible. Each recovered piece is photographed, measured, and placed in labeled containers for delivery to the crime lab's ballistics unit. Chain of custody extends here as well. Who retrieved the item, who sealed it, and who signed for it on transfer. If a projectile demonstrates features consistent with a .40 caliber jacketed design, that notation is descriptive, class characteristics only, until a lab comparison is performed. The morgue does not assign a make or model. It records the evidence that allows a lab to do that work later. Toxicology is drawn under standard protocol. Results in a case like this rarely change the manner of death determination. They can, however, answer defense questions about impairment or medical conditions and remove speculative arguments before they start. Samples are sealed, logged, and staged for the state lab. The autopsy file will later include chain of custody pages for these specimens identical in rigor to the pages for bullets and clothing. Documentation runs in parallel. A death certificate draft lists cause and manner as provisional until the complete report is signed. Once the autopsy is finalized, the certificate reflects the confirmed language: gunshot wounds, homicide. Copies of the report are routed to the lead detective and the district attorney's office. If the investigation requires, the medical examiner can provide sworn testimony on cause, manner, wound trajectories, and the integrity of evidence handling. That is why the language stays clinical and the measurements meticulous. Two ME practices in campus cases frequently matter on the back end. First, retention of clothing under refrigeration with minimal handling, which preserves possible trace such as transferred fibers or residue relevant to vehicle interiors and seat materials. Second, retention of hand swabs and nail clippings, even when the shooting scenario does not obviously demand them. These may later corroborate or rebut claims about physical contact patterns in the minutes before the gunfire. Neither practice makes headlines, but both can close gaps when defense theories shift months down the line. There is a human dimension that belongs here too, handled without spectacle. Families are briefed in plain language and given access to victim advocates who understand the legal timeline. In towns anchored by universities, prevention depends on trust. When authorities treat the morgue as a professional, transparent step, not a mystery box, communities are more likely to believe the findings that follow. In the same way small campus routines can prevent harm, small documentation habits in a morgue can prevent doubt. An investigator's note worth stating once: the data in this case aligns neatly. Outdoor scene, vehicle repositioned, cameras bracketing the crucial minutes, autopsy consistent with firearm homicide. The symmetry is reassuring, but it can also hide oversights. That is why the report will be read line by line against the field logs in the next stages. The data aligned too cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem. A careful team treats neatness as a prompt to verify, not a reason to relax. With the cause and manner certified, the case file gains a fixed point. Detectives now have an autopsy that supports the lot-based reconstruction and a sealed set of items ready for lab work. The next move is back to the vehicle and the asphalt to link morgue measurements to traces that were never meant to be there, and to see if the camera minutes and the wound tracks tell the same story. With the body as seen fully documented and evidence transferred to the lab, the investigation returns to the lot and the car interior for a trace-by-trace build-out. When lab work begins, which would you prioritize for early comparison? Projectile class to known 40 SW features, or fiber transfer from clothing to the vehicle's back seat. The residence hall parking lot stays sealed while technicians map it like a grid. Cones mark the initial contact point where small personal items were recovered. A second cluster of markers outlines a sedan parked a short distance away, slightly off axis in its space. That misalignment is not decoration. It's a cue that the car did not arrive in a straight, routine park. Officers confirm dorm doors and locks are intact and undisturbed. Nothing suggests an entry into the building. The confrontation happened outside, and the car's position supports a rapid, pressured movement after that contact. A camera mounted above the lot entrance provides the first reliable bracket. Frames show normal traffic before 8:20 p.m., then movement consistent with a vehicle stopping where it typically wouldn't, backing and realigning. Technicians pull the native video files, not screen recordings, to preserve metadata and avoid compression artifacts. A second camera angled toward the walkway captures silhouettes and headlights, enough to sync with dispatch times from Chapter 1. The purpose is correlation, not drama. Do those adjustments line up with the minutes after the cutoff call? Inside the car, collection begins at the back seat. Photographs are taken with scales, then a layered approach follows. Vacuum lifts capture trace particulates. Tape lifts target fibers. Swabs collect possible residue in defined quadrants to avoid cross-contamination. An alternate light source scans fabric seams and door panels for transfer that the eye can't see. Each sample is labeled "working" until a laboratory links it to a source. The cabin is not torn apart, it's sequenced. Anything removed is logged and resealed. On the exterior, latent prints are attempted on the passenger door frame and rear handles. Even if lift quality is poor on textured surfaces, negative or partial results still matter. They guide which surfaces are more promising and which are not worth reprocessing. The trunk seam is photographed, then left closed pending a warrant scope review. Tires are photographed for orientation and contact patch. The slight angle of the front wheels, left of center, is recorded as a measurement rather than a theory. If a reconstruction later needs to show a hurried reposition, these details will speak. Technicians trace a short path from the contact point to the car's rear passenger door, measuring stride length and directionality across the painted lines. They document where shoe scuffs intersect with grit and where they don't. The goal is to quantify a brief forced movement without speculating beyond the data. The data align too cleanly. Sometimes, that was the problem. That quiet caution keeps the team verifying each inference with a second method. Video time against measured distance, lift results against fabric type, wheel angle against stall geometry. By the end of this processing window, the lot has yielded a coherent set of working and confirmed notes. Confirmed. No forced entry into the dorm. Personal items recovered at the initial contact point. Camera frames that bracket the crucial minutes. Working. Fiber and particulate transfers from the back seat. Latent prints of varying quality on exterior touch points. A repositioned vehicle captured by camera and measured on the ground. Nothing here conflicts with the autopsy's later classification. Instead, the scene gives the lab the vocabulary it will need. Samples tied to coordinates, times tied to angles. For a campus community, this work can feel cold, but precision is the most respectful thing you can offer a victim and a family. It prevents confusion later, and it stops unsupported theories from filling gaps that careful documentation could have closed. With the lot mapped and the car processed, the next layer comes from systems that keep time. Investigators start with native camera files, no screenshots, to preserve metadata. Timestamps are aligned against dispatch clocks to account for any drift. Frames bracket the crucial window. Normal pedestrian flow before 8:20, then a brief cluster of movement in the lane by the residence hall, and a sedan shifting position in a way that reads hurried rather than routine. The same minutes appear in the dispatch log that marked a welfare check escalating to potential danger within minutes. Carrier records and campus network access logs are requested on parallel tracks. The goal is not to pry into private content. It is to place devices near corners, doors, and lanes at known times. The victim's number shows no outgoing activity after 8:20 p.m., consistent with Chapter 1's negative evidence. That silence narrows the window. A second set of records traces a different device tied by contact history to the victim in the prior weeks, moving off campus shortly after officers respond. The sector hop is coarse by design, but when matched to cameras outside the residence hall and to a curbside pickup captured on a neighboring lens, it becomes actionable. Financial corroboration is modest but useful. A small receipt time-stamped later that night matches the movement pattern of the same party seen leaving campus, food, and a short sit-down before a ride to another address. Residential cameras at that address confirm a brief arrival and departure. Building logs note a door cycle consistent with a quick stop, not an overnight stay. The timeline that began with a call cutting out is now anchored by external clocks. The subject cannot edit. Point A at the lot, point B at a casual meal, point C at a drop near the city center. Detectives build a single glide path from campus to downtown, projecting where the person of interest could be by the early hours. They keep the language careful. The devices in these logs are not guilt. They are location and time. When a pattern aligns too neatly, camera to carrier to receipt, it is checked a second way, a second camera angle, a different carrier datum. Even a traffic sensor can confirm or break a supposed match. The data align too cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem. That caution prevents a false confidence loop. By later that night, patrol units have a workable corridor. The alert posture shifts from canvas to directed patrols. A downtown camera suite provides another hit on the same clothing seen leaving the earlier address. Officers tighten the search grid around a cluster of blocks that can absorb a person fast. Transit stops, worship spaces open late for community programs, and buildings with multiple doors. The pursuit window edges past midnight. Radios stay disciplined. Description, last known direction, and do not chase restrictions that keep the public safe while maintaining coverage. This chapter's gains are technical but human in impact. When campuses invest in reliable timestamping, camera maintenance, and quick-turn data requests, families get answers faster. When agencies write policies that favor native files and second-source verification, wrongful assumptions are less likely to harden into narrative. Crime investigations move at the speed of the first accurate clock. The next step is simple and difficult. Match the digital path to words. Interviews and statements now stand against camera frames, carrier sectors, and receipts. Inconsistencies will either collapse or survive contact with the logs. Now the words have to match the clocks. Detectives move from the parking lot and screens to people. Interviews are scheduled in a tight sequence so statements can't drift with rumor. The first account is taken from the family member who was on the phone when the audio cut, concise, factual, and time-stamped by the service provider. The ear witness recalls a brief exchange, sudden interruption, then silence. That description is logged, not dramatized, and aligned with the known call time. It supports the negative phone activity already verified within minutes of the response. Friends and teammates provide context from earlier in October, messages that felt manipulative, unwanted contact that escalated, and a pattern of pressure around money and control. Investigators keep each detail tethered to something checkable, saved texts, call logs, campus emails. If a witness says there were threats, the follow-up is, show the message, let us copy the header. This keeps the narrative from straying into impressions and ensures every sentence can be carried into a courtroom if needed. When memories conflict, the cooler statement is the one that can be printed and time-stamped. Next are the acquaintances who appear on the camera corridor and transaction trail later that night. Their interviews are deliberately bracketed by known times, pickup windows, meal receipt times, entry and exit from a residence, and the eventual downtown drop. Each account is walked forward in 5-minute blocks. Where did you stop the car? Which door did he use? Did you see a phone, a bag, a jacket? The goal is not to corner someone into a technical lie, it's to align human recall with clocks that don't blink. Where an answer is vague, somewhere around 9. The transcript inserts the fixed time and asks if that changes the memory. Often it does. The language stays neutral. A person of interest is referred to by role and proximity, not by motive. Still, the pattern that emerges is recognizable in stalking and intimate partner violence cases. Repeated unwanted contact, false pretenses to gain trust, and a quick escalation when control is challenged. According to those interviewed, attempts were made to distance and report earlier in the month. Those reports have paper trails. The presence of documentation matters. In campus crime investigations, policies only help when someone can pull the exact message that triggered a call to the police. Two inconsistencies stand out and get marked for re-interview. First, a ride segment that one witness places before dinner appears after the meal on camera. When shown the receipt time, the witness corrects their sequence without resistance, which is common when people compress busy nights. Second, a brief stop described as 10 minutes tops logs closer to 20 on a building's access system. That difference isn't guilt, it's a gap. Detectives request exterior angles and confirm that the person re-entered to retrieve an item, accounting for the added minutes. The correction tightens the corridor built in the previous chapter. The interviewer's tone matters. People are more accurate when they're not defending themselves. Questions are short. Assertions are avoided. Where necessary, a second detective runs a blind read of the transcript against the timeline and flags lines that either add precision or add heat. The standard is, will a juror understand this sentence in one read, and can we attach a document or video frame to it? If not, it goes back for clarification. A few lines of inquiry are closed deliberately. Rumors about campus break-ins or erased cameras don't survive contact with maintenance logs and access reports. Claims of a dorm corridor encounter are set aside when keycard and door alarm data show no entry indicators at the relevant times. This is where careful earlier work pays off. The scene integrity established on the lot prevents a narrative detour that would waste hours and seed confusion. One understated human point belongs here. People who give statements after traumatic nights often carry guilt for what they didn't notice or didn't do. A good interviewer acknowledges that without turning the room into therapy, clarity is a service, precision is a kindness. Clean transcripts not only help prosecutors, they also spare witnesses from reliving events repeatedly because the first interview was vague. By the end of this round, the bookable facts look like this. A real-time ear witness anchors the start. Multiple acquaintances corroborate the path off campus, the food stop, the short residential visit, and the downtown drop. Minor timing errors are corrected against receipts and access logs, and no witness places the confrontation inside a dorm. The next leap is from words to paperwork that can stand on its own. Where the gun came from, who touched it first, and how it arrived in the wrong hands 5 days before the shooting. A careful story stays careful here. No speculation about motive beyond what documents can carry, and no guesses about intention where only outcome is known. The stronger choice is to let records speak. Purchase forms, transfer messages, and the kind of receipt that no one keeps for drama, but everyone keeps for audits. From the statements gathered in earlier phases, detectives moved toward the paperwork that explained how the gun entered circulation. Federal dealer logs confirm that a Beretta PX-4 Storm 40 caliber was purchased on September 8, 2018 at a licensed firearms outlet in Utah. The buyer listed on the ATF Form 4473 was not the individual who later carried the weapon. Agents determined this was a straw purchase. A woman named Sarah Emily Lady filled out the form while Nathan Daniel Vogel directed the transaction. Both later admitted to this role in federal court. Chain of custody became the key link. For weeks, the firearm remained with one of the straw buyers. Then, on October 17, 2018, records and testimony show it was loaned to an acquaintance who 5 days later was involved in the homicide on the University of Utah campus. That handoff is marked as evidence. Testimony confirmed, supported by sworn statements and corroborating details in prosecution files. Investigators didn't stop at the form. They matched the purchase to a same-day bank transaction and point-of-sale entry at the store. Store video confirmed who stood at the counter and whose card processed the payment. This created a layered evidentiary trail. Evidence, digital confirmed, tying the false paperwork to real individuals and specific financial authorizations. Because the shooter died later that night, accountability for the procurement shifted to the living intermediaries. The U.S. Attorney's Office filed federal charges against both straw buyers for lying on the 4473 and transferring the weapon illegally. ATF agents secured the original form, verified ink and signature details, and presented it as proof that the box confirming the actual buyer had been falsified. For prosecutors, the timing mattered. The straw purchase in September, the loan in mid-October, and the homicide on October 22nd created a sequence tight enough to demonstrate pre-offense planning. The weapon had not been circulating for months in uncontrolled hands. Instead, it was specifically placed within reach of the offender days before the shooting. From a systems perspective, this was the choke point where prevention might have intervened. Dealers followed procedure, yet the falsification slipped through. It raises a broader question for communities and viewers alike. If compliance systems catch only what is visible, how should responsibility be balanced between those who falsify and those who process the paperwork? By the morning after the shooting, investigators from multiple agencies were coordinating to assemble the prosecutorial theory, even though the gunman had already taken his own life. The Utah Department of Public Safety, the University of Utah Police, Salt Lake City Police, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, all played distinct roles. Each focused on a separate but connected line of responsibility: how the weapon was procured, how campus response unfolded, and what systemic failures allowed the crime to escalate. The ATF moved quickly with federal prosecutors. Their focus was clear: establish that the firearm used in the homicide was illegally obtained through a straw purchase. The buyer of record had falsified federal paperwork, and agents retrieved the original Form 4473 along with surveillance video from the dealer. These items became evidence, physical, digital, confirmed, strengthening charges against the intermediaries. The U.S. Attorney's Office prepared indictments against both straw buyers under Title 18, Section 922. On the local side, university police faced scrutiny. Dispatch records, call logs, and internal emails showed how Lauren McCluskey's prior reports of stalking had been handled. Independent reviews later confirmed gaps in response protocols, particularly around cross-checking offender criminal history. The interagency theory therefore rested on a dual track: criminal liability for the gun providers and civil accountability for institutional failures. Detectives structured their charging timeline with precision. Within 48 hours, both straw buyers were taken into custody, interviewed under federal advisement, and confronted with the inconsistencies between their statements and the digital records. In sworn affidavits, they admitted their role in procuring the handgun. These statements became evidence. Testimony confirmed. The interagency component extended beyond law enforcement. The Utah State Legislature and the university's legal counsel became involved, reviewing compliance with Title IX obligations and campus safety regulations. While these were not criminal proceedings, they influenced the broader theory of accountability and later framed the civil settlement with McCluskey's family. Coordination between local and federal entities also highlighted a structural tension. When a perpetrator is deceased, criminal liability ends, but supporting actors can still be prosecuted. This distinction shaped public understanding of the case. The message was pointed: while the shooter could not stand trial, the chain of enablers and the systems that failed him and his victim could still be held to account. For viewers, this raises a difficult but necessary question. When a violent crime ends in the offender's death, where should the justice system focus? On the intermediaries who facilitated the weapon, or on the institutions tasked with protecting the victim? From procurement and interagency coordination, the file moves into courtrooms: one track federal, one civil, each limited to what the records can carry. Federal prosecutors start by locking foundation. Dealer acquisition records, the original ATF Form 4473, point-of-sale logs, and store video are noticed for admission. Defense counsel files standard challenges: chain of custody on the paper form, scope and authenticity for the surveillance, and relevance limits for downstream events at the university. The government answers with basics that juries understand: the original ink-signed form, a serial number that never changes, and a video that shows who stood at the counter when the authorization cleared. Nothing speculative is required. Each exhibit is anchored to time and place. Suppression arguments fade as stipulations crystallize what the jury will see without risk of confusion. Pretrial release conditions for the straw purchasers are set with routine restrictions. No firearms, no new criminal conduct, appear as ordered. With the shooter deceased, the federal charges focus sharply on the falsified transfer and the subsequent loan. Prosecutors keep motive out. Intent is satisfied by the false statement on a federal form and the unlawful handoff. When the admissibility fights are resolved, both defendants plead guilty to federal firearms offenses tied to the September purchase and the mid-October loan. The court accepts the pleas after a factual basis is entered on the record. The names on the form, the serial number recorded in the dealer book, and the transfer that put a .40 caliber handgun in the borrower's hands days before the campus shooting. Sentencing follows federal guidelines. The court weighs acceptance of responsibility against the gravity of enabling access to a weapon used in a homicide. The judge speaks to deterrence and compliance. Dealer safeguards matter, but the form is only as honest as the person who signs it. The outcome lands where the facts lead. Convictions entered, sentences imposed, and firearm disabilities that will last. Accountability reaches as far as the living links allow. On a separate track, the civil action centers on institutional duty. The family's attorneys assemble a timeline from dispatch audio, call logs, campus emails, and resident life notes to show how reports of stalking and extortion were handled in the weeks before the crime. Expert reports examine threat assessment protocols, the use of criminal history checks, and referral pathways between campus police and state parole. The university engages outside reviewers, corrects policy gaps, and commits to measurable changes. Clearer escalation thresholds for stalking reports, quicker cross-checks on offender histories, dedicated case managers for victims, and training tied to early intervention best practices. The parties resolve the wrongful death claims through a civil settlement that includes monetary relief and formal campus safety reforms. The settlement carries weight because it does not rewrite the night. It addresses the decisions that might have changed the approach before the night arrived. Admissibility in the civil context is narrower than a trial spectacle. Records come in through custodians. Opinions are tied to accepted practices, not hindsight. The message is practical. Systems can be rebuilt. In the months that follow, the university stands up a prevention and education center in Lauren's name, updates victim notification workflows, and adds direct lines to local law enforcement for high-risk conduct. Those are not headlines. They are checklists, and checklists are how people are protected on ordinary days. The criminal portion of this story cannot deliver the courtroom moment some viewers expect. The shooter cannot be tried. He died by suicide later that night. Yet the law has other levers. Federal convictions for straw purchasers mark the illegal pipeline. The civil settlement binds the institution to changes with timelines and budgets attached. Together, they form a public record that speaks without drama. Compliance matters, documentation matters, and when someone reports stalking or extortion, every minute at intake is a minute you either save or lose. For anyone living with unwanted contact or coercion, the lesson is to document and to escalate early. Save the messages. Report patterns, not just incidents. Ask for a supervisor if you need one. If violence appears imminent, say the words that move resources quickly. I am in danger. And when the window narrows to seconds, use the number that summons help. Say 911. We tell these stories not to sensationalize pain, but to make plain how procedures, training, and honest paperwork can prevent another campus night from turning into a crime scene. This series began with clocks and ended with signatures because both are hard to argue with. They do not cure loss, but they can change what happens next. Shooter deceased. Federal co-defendants convicted. Civil settlement reached. Looking back on this crime, I can't help but think how quickly silence and hesitation can cost a life. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that reporting danger early and demanding accountability are not overreactions. They are acts of survival. Systems may fail, but speaking up gives them a chance to work. What do you think would have made the biggest difference here? Faster police response, stronger campus protocols, or tighter gun laws? Share your thoughts in the comments and let me know where you're watching from. If this story reached you, please subscribe to this channel so we can keep uncovering the lessons behind real crimes together.